Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. In today's video, we'll discuss 10 things in my wardrobe that were regrettable purchases, why I bought them, and what I've learned since then. If you haven't seen Raphael's video on 20 things he regrets buying, I'd recommend taking a look. You'll probably learn some things not only about men's style, but also about money management. Today's video covers similar ground for items I've purchased, whether that be individual garments or collections of things, with one key difference from Raphael's video. I don't actually regret buying all of them. You'll see what I mean by this in a moment, but to get things rolling, let's start with 6 things that I definitely do regret buying. First is clinical strength antiperspirant and antiperspirant in general. As I've mentioned elsewhere on the channel, I have a condition called hyperhidrosis, which is marked by excessive perspiration. Sparing all of the details for the sake of modesty, what's important here is that over the years I've tried numerous products to try to minimize perspiration across my body. When it comes to my underarms, I used a clinical strength antiperspirant for many years, but because my perspiration was so persistent, all I would end up with was an unpleasant sludge under my arms after usually just a few hours. Also, because aluminum is a key ingredient in many antiperspirants serving to block the pores, it can corrode over time. And this, more than bacteria or the sweat itself, is the thing that chiefly causes underarm stains on shirts. And with all the aluminum that was in that antiperspirant, there was even a time or two that I set off an airport metal detector. I'm not kidding. About 2 years ago, I decided that if these antiperspirants weren't doing a good job of stopping my sweating, and if they were causing these inconveniences besides, I might as well stop fighting the root cause. Since then, I've switched to non-antiperspirant deodorant, and while I do still sweat quite a bit, and may seek other medical solutions in the future for it, I have found that not using antiperspirant to fight my underarm sweating has left me feeling better overall. Next up is 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. As we've previously mentioned in our video on 15 healthy hair tips, which you can find here, there are a number of reasons not to buy combination shampoo conditioners. For a start, shampoo is something that can actually do more harm than good to your hair if used improperly. Cheap shampoo, though it is economical, is often full of ingredients that are collectively known as sulfates. While these detergents can help to make the product sudsy, they also deprive your hair of its natural oils, leaving it looking dry and brittle. To avoid these effects, you can look for a low sulfate or sulfate-free shampoo, which cleans without removing the oil completely. Second, and perhaps more importantly, you actually don't need to use shampoo every time you shower. Constant shampooing, even with sulfate-free products, can strip your scalp of natural oils and will definitely dry out your hair, even if it's already somewhat dry to begin with. Therefore, most barbers and stylists will recommend that while you should rinse your hair every time you shower, you should only use shampoo 1 to 2 times a week. What you should use more often and even daily then is conditioner, which helps to protect and moisturize your hair. All that to say, these combination or 2-in-1 products are essentially making each of their components, the shampoo and conditioner, less effective on both fronts. And it goes without saying here, for any of those 3-in-1 combination products that also include body wash, stay away. I used a 2-in-1 product for years, but since switching to separate shampoo and conditioner about a year ago, I've noticed that my hair feels noticeably healthier. I only shampoo about once or twice a week, usually following whenever I've used hair product. I haven't written off liquid products entirely and switched to bar soap as Raphael has, but it may be something to consider in the future. My next regrettable purchase is this gray suit. I purchased the suit I'm wearing in today's video 7 years ago at the age of 18, and it was my first true suit. More on what I mean by that later. The trousers came unfinished, so having to go to an alterations tailor to get them hemmed made me feel like I was getting the suit to fit just right. Little did I know at the time, though, that there are actually many more facets to getting a suit to fit you well. Yes, the construction and materials of this suit are also quite cheap, which made for a low price point that was attractive to a cash-strapped student like myself, but as we've said many times before, cheap materials are secondary to a proper fit. But of course, I readily admit that this suit is far from properly fitting on me. The jacket is much too big in the torso for one thing, so it looks like I'm practically swimming in fabric. The trouser legs are also too wide for my build, but because the fabric is light, there isn't any attractive drape to them, just ugly wrinkling. I could go on, but suffice to say that this suit definitely doesn't meet our fit criteria. I probably could try to have it tailored further to get it to fit better, but I think a better choice would be just to find a suit that fits better from the outset and is of a bit higher quality. So stay tuned for that in the future. Where did I get this suit, you ask? The answer is the now ever-present force in so many of our lives, Amazon.com. And that brings me to my next pick for today, which is several of the other garments I've bought or tried to buy from that website. From a sport coat that was too boxy on me and of low quality, to trousers that were far too baggy, sensing a pattern here, also to cheap ties, I've realized, especially since joining the Gentleman's Gazette, that buying clothing sight unseen from a cheap mass-market retailer instead of a dedicated menswear outlet means you do get what you pay for, which is usually disappointing results. Speaking of ties, the next item on the list is my overly shiny satin silk or synthetic ties in my wardrobe. Some of these were purchased from Amazon, such as the bow tie I'm wearing here today, and others were purchased in person from stores. But the common denominator here is that their blindingly shiny finish and often bright, loud colors makes them look like cheap, low-quality ties almost immediately. They were at least tolerable for a young man just getting into menswear, but since learning about the hallmarks of a quality tie, especially like those from Fort Belvedere, these shiny ties don't see much use for me anymore, outside perhaps of a Halloween costume. Similarly, cheap and low-quality dress shoes are my next item here. Before joining the Gentleman's Gazette, I viewed dress shoes in a way that's similar to many men out there, which is to say that in today's fast fashion society, shoes should be purchased for a reasonable price of around $100 or so, worn until the materials wear out and then thrown away and replaced. Some examples would include the pair of loafers you're seeing here and the Derby shoes I'm wearing in today's video. The truth about men's dress shoes, though, is that if you're willing to spend a bit more at the outset, say something in the $200 to $400 range, you're going to be able to find shoes that are made of higher quality materials and with better construction. Take, for example, the Park Avenue from Allen Edmonds. For a sticker price of $395, but often on sale for less, you'll be getting a shoe made from quality leather in both the upper and the sole, rather than a cheap shoe with a cheap leather upper and a sole made from rubber, plastic, or particle board. And also of note here is that shoes with a Goodyear welt or a Blake stitch can be re-soled by a cobbler. So if you maintain the upper properly, they can be worn for years, if not decades. Meanwhile, these cheap shoes had their heel blocks worn down in around a year's time, and because the soles are just glued on rather than stitched, they can't reasonably be repaired. In addition, the cheap leather uppers are showing discoloration in an unattractive way, and because the shoes are slightly too big on me to begin with, they're also wrinkling unattractively. So, those are my 6 things that I truly regret buying. Next up are 4 things that I could regret, but don't. At least not entirely. The next 4 picks that round out my list today are things that could be considered regrettable, but for one reason or another, I'm still glad that I bought them. First up is my fairly extensive collection of Charles Tyrwhitt shirts, such as the light blue one I'm wearing in today's video. Why would these be considered regrettable? Well, in one word, the answer is fit. All of these shirts are much too big on me in both the torso and the arms. Because they were my first foray into online made-to-measure, I selected slim fit, not knowing that for someone as light and thin as I am, this would still be much too big on my frame. Also, I started collecting these shirts before joining the Gentleman's Gazette, so I didn't have a complete picture of how a dress shirt should actually fit. Why don't I regret buying them then? Well, as I said, they were my first experience with made-to-measure, and I appreciated going through the process and having something that was made for me, even if they aren't true bespoke. Furthermore, I now most often wear them underneath jackets or sweaters, so their too large fit is somewhat obscured, and therefore they still work for me for the time being as I look toward the future to upgrade my shirt wardrobe. And, as I've mentioned before, I do still get plenty of compliments on them as well. Finally here, learning that something doesn't fit well on you is still learning. Style should be an ever-evolving journey, and these shirts have played an important part in mine. Also, the difference between these and something like my gray suit is that while I can find ways to still make the shirts look reasonably good, the fit of this suit is immediately apparent, so it's really a no-go for me at this point in time. Speaking of which, you'll recall that toward the beginning of the video, I mentioned that my gray suit was the first true suit that I owned. This is because the first suit that I had wasn't really a suit at all. What do I mean by this? In high school, I participated in forensics, which is to say speech and debate teams. At least at that time, the standard uniform for men was a black suit. Being young, inexperienced in the ways of menswear, and on a budget, I simply picked up a black jacket from a department store and paired it with a pair of black trousers that I'd already had for years. Fortunately, the dyes and weaves of the two garments were similar enough that to the casual observer, they actually did appear to match. But as we've discussed numerous other times on the channel, a suit is made from a jacket and trousers as well as an optional waistcoat that are all cut from the same fabric. As with the gray suit, the black jacket was much too baggy on me. Why don't I regret this ensemble then? The answer is because it made me feel confident and in control, as a suit ideally should. It wasn't strictly correct by the guidelines of menswear, but it was for me a suit of armor that helped me feel more comfortable giving speeches in front of people, something with which I had struggled earlier in childhood. In fact, if I hadn't joined these speech and debate teams in high school, I probably wouldn't have been confident enough to eventually find my way to on-camera speaking or joining the Gentleman's Gazette. I'm not saying that this black suit was directly responsible for this, but it did probably play a small part. Another black item next, the black wool felt fedora you're seeing here. Around the same time as my purchase of my black suit, I was a teenager just getting into the world of menswear. I really didn't know much about fit yet, that of course would take a while, but I knew that I wanted a hat to go with my suit. As such, I found a black wool felt fedora online. Now, it wasn't a cheap trilby bought from Target, which were quite popular around 2011 or so, but in fact a genuine fedora purchased from a hatter. And while it was pretty soft in construction, black wasn't a flattering or versatile color for me, and the brim was too wide for my face, this hat did still give me confidence. I wore it often with that black suit in high school, and even with non-matching outerwear for my first few years of college. Once I started looking around for vintage fedoras on eBay and in secondhand stores, however, I started building up my current collection, and this hat stayed on the rack. As you can see though, I still haven't gotten rid of the old hat yet because it holds a special place in my wardrobe. And who knows, maybe for ultra-casual outfits or doing things outdoors where I'd still like to be wearing a traditional hat and black works in my wardrobe, it could still have a place. To round out my list today, I've got one more cheap black item, a pre-tied bow tie. As regular viewers are no doubt aware, we here at the Gentleman's Gazette recommend that a man learn to tie his own bow tie whenever possible. A pre-tied bow tie is cold and sterile in its perfection, and it immediately gives off a juvenile, unprofessional look. But in fairness, I first purchased a pre-tied bow tie at the age of 15 when I was still a juvenile and a non-professional. I needed it for a makeshift tuxedo of sorts, so I wore it along with a borrowed black jacket and those trusty black trousers to serve as master of ceremonies for a school concert in the spring of 2009. My lack of regret for purchasing this bow tie comes from the fact that it did make me feel confident in front of a crowd, honing my skills as a presenter for really the first time, even before later joining the speech team. There's my list for today then. 6 items I can honestly say I do regret buying, and 4 that, while objectively regrettable, have played an important part in my own style journey. Your takeaway from today's video then can hopefully be this. While abiding by the traditional guidelines of classic menswear is a surefire way to get yourself to a stylish wardrobe, don't be afraid of experimenting when you're first starting out in that world, no matter how old you may be. We can all learn through trial and error with the ultimate goal of becoming more stylish. In today's video, as you've probably noticed, I'm wearing several of the items that were featured on my list today. Chief among them is this gray suit, which, as I said, fits pretty poorly. It's a fairly standard model with 2 buttons, notched lapels, flapped pockets, and side vents. The trousers are uncuffed, and you can see how they flop around because of the thin fabric. I'm also wearing a plain light blue shirt from Tyrwhitt and one of my cheap, overly shiny bow ties. You can see how much the ends have been fraying over time. My other regrettable item today is, of course, my cheap tan derby shoes, which feature some broguing as well. What about my outfit don't I regret then? Well, as you might have guessed, it's all of the Fort Belvedere accessories I'm currently sporting. These would include my cufflinks, which are our platinum-plated sterling silver eagle claw designs featuring lapis lazuli as the stone, and my shadow-striped socks, which today are in navy and royal blue. The boutonniere is in a prototype design in a blue color, and the pocket square is our light blue linen model featuring a blue hand-rolled X stitch. You can find all of these accessories in the Fort Belvedere shop, with the exception of this specific boutonniere, though we do of course have a wide array of other attractive models to choose from.